Travis, wonderful to have you with us. Noah Feldman was with us yesterday from Harvard Law and spoke of the moment of Justice Kennedy. Help our audience with how Justice Kennedy practiced Supreme Court law. What was he like in the chambers?
Well, in chambers and with his colleagues, he was just incredibly collegial. You know, the court presents in its written work as sometimes fairly a combative place among the justices. In fact, many of them have very close relationships. And Justice Kennedy really was a part of that fabric, friends on both sides of the aisle, as we would think of it from outside the court. And I think you saw that in the statements from his colleagues yesterday, who really will miss his personal presence on the court and in chambers, as well as his legal mind and his work.
Critically, as we move to Brett Kavanaugh and the other candidates, to me it seems like a generational shift. Noah and others, Cass Sunstein and others, speak of Justice Kennedy's interpretation of dignity is his broader view of making law. Is that a generational shift of the past? And what will the new law be, whether it's Justice Kavanaugh or someone else?
Well, I think I'm not sure if it's a generational shift in legal thinking. It's certainly anytime there's an opportunity for a president to make an appointment, a nomination to the Supreme Court, it's usually a generational shift, just in the sense that Justice Kennedy will be 82 this summer, and all of the folks who are mentioned as possible replacements are in their early 50s or maybe their late 40s. In terms of his jurisprudence and what the future of the court looks like, Justice Kennedy really is at heart a conservative, but someone, if you trace his roots to California and maybe think of a Western, a U.S. Western libertarianism, and that's really a streak that runs through all of his opinions. And there is probably a new type of conservatism, whoever is nominated to replace him.
From where you sit, what is the distinction between the present Justice Gorsuch and a candidate such as Kavanaugh, or is it almost a cookie-cutter modern conservatism?
Well, I think to contrast Justice Gorsuch and Judge Kavanaugh, there are probably some differences on the margins in the way they would approach certain issues, and certainly in the types of experience that they've had. Judge Gorsuch, now Justice Gorsuch, sat on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, which is a circuit that is a little different from Judge Kavanaugh's court here in D.C. for the types of issues where they have expertise. But in terms of their legal thinking, their work as a mainstream conservative in the law today, those are two very similar names.
Your voice and heritage, and Professor Feldman at Harvard captured this in Scorpions beautifully. Your voice and heritage out of Kansas and Chicago is critical, in that it's a Midwest voice, and whether it's Whiz or White from the past and the rest of them, there is an American view that the Supreme Court is controlled by the elites of the East and a few selected liberals that got lost on the West Coast. How mid-continent will this Supreme Court become? How Kansas-like will this Supreme Court be?
I'm not sure it will be terribly Kansas-like, but I would say that of the potential nominees that are listed now, all of them, regardless of their current geography, share an academic background and a background in the law that looks very similar and is fairly elite. And Professor Feldman and others have rightly pointed out that this is not a court made up of Byron Whites and Tony Kennedys and folks from Minnesota, California, all across the country. This is an East Coast court, regardless of who is nominated, and even if that person happens to sit now in the Midwest.
Travis, we often talk about politicians getting into power and changing a little bit in how they view things, in trying to find either more consensus or being more belligerent. Is it the same for justices? Do people change when they get appointed to the Supreme Court in their beliefs?
I don't know if they change immediately upon appointment to the Supreme Court, but we've seen historically changes while justices serve on the court. And of course, the court is a legal institution, but also in many ways a political institution. Justices read the newspaper, they know the issues of our time, and as the balance of courts shifts and as members come and go, you do see changes among the remaining members. That certainly happened with Justice O'Connor, particularly when Justice Scalia Scalia joined the court. Some would say that it happened a bit with Justice Kennedy after Justice O'Connor departed the court in 2006. And it could be something that happens that we see potentially with Chief Justice Roberts, who many are saying now becomes the center of the court, regardless of who is confirmed. But that center will have moved slightly to the right if it is the Chief Justice now who occupies that middle position.
What exact effect will this have on social issues facing the court? Is there one social issue that will, really be in the limelight?
Well, there's discussion about several social issues, abortion probably being the leading one, but it's not clear what exact effect a new justice will have. Many of the justices, or all of them really on the short list, of course, come from the more conservative school of legal thought. That doesn't necessarily mean that all abortion decisions are potentially overturned or reversed. There could be some narrowing, but frankly, we've seen that over the last 10 or 20 years, narrowing of the abortion opinions, even with Justice Kennedy, frankly, at the center of the court.
Mr. Lenkner, what is the difference between a 5-4 and a 6-3 court? If we get to a 6-3, I mean, I can't even fathom getting to 7-2, but what's the difference between 5-4 and 6-3?
Well, I think internally at the court as well as externally, just from a public awareness and trust in the court as an institution standpoint, there's certainly, for all of us externally watching the court, when you see a 6-3 or 7-2 and you see broad consensus around an opinion on a controversial issue, that probably means it's a more narrow opinion. Right. And for many people, that's a comforting sign that the court is being more incrementalist as opposed to taking some broader steps. I don't know that a replacement for Justice Kennedy changes the number of 5-4 decisions on this court. And it's interesting, actually, in the term just concluded, Justice Kennedy never joined the 4 more liberal justices to create that classic 5-4 that we've seen in previous terms. So it could be that next term, with a replacement for Justice Kennedy, looks a lot like this term in terms of how the votes stack up, among the 9 of them.